up, you guys? The Curious Owl here, and today I am going to be doing the Mummy Movies book tag. So about 3 years ago now, I created my own book tag called the Mummy Movies book tag, which basically was a book tag that was dedicated to questions involving the Mummy movies that include the 1999 version starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, and then also the sequel more so, which is the Mummy Returns, which also stars Dwayne Johnson as the Scorpion King. So this was something I was very excited to create because if y'all don't know, I am a huge Mummy movies fan. They are my favorite movies of all time. The third one, most people don't care for that one, but it is still part of the franchise. And I actually have a tattoo that is a reference to the mummy. So you can see the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics down here. It stands for the word rise, which if you're familiar in the movies, they say the word rise a lot, which in the language is the word yatuai. And so this is always like a little fun thing for me because I just love these movies so much. They're my favorite thing in the entire world. And I wanted so badly to make my own tag 3 years ago that I created this. And it hasn't really gotten much traction, but I'm hoping now that with a little bit more friends in the community, I might be able to get this pushed out again if I can. So if you're a fan of the Mummy movies, I would highly suggest you do this tag and let me know what your guys' answers are, because this is going to be a really fun one, I think, for some of you guys. But without further ado, let's get into the questions for the tag. The first one is The Mummy 1999. Pick a first book of a series that was a strong start. Now, I did not reference the old video I did for this. I just pulled up the video and found the questions. I did not go back and watch my old video. So I think that honestly, the first thing I can think of in terms of a strong start to a series has got to be The Final Strike by Sarah El Arifi. I read this in August and this was just blown out of the water. Amazing first book in a series. It was so encapsulating and it was so really layered that I was surprised. Like, I felt that going into it, I didn't really expect there to be so much depth to the story, but I was greatly surprised, especially with the fact that we have 3 main characters in this and you only get to see bits and pieces of one, but it makes me realize that just means we're going to see them a lot more going further into the series. And the way that this ended was a lot of twists and turns I was not expecting in the slightest, and it makes me very excited to see what this is going to end up becoming. And I'm very upset that I have to wait at least a year for the next book because I need the next book like immediately. The next question is The Mummy Returns, the 2001 movie. Pick a second book of a series that was just as good, if not better, than the first. I guess the closest thing would be Descender Volume 3 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen, because while this is not necessarily the sequel, meaning the second book, and this is the 3rd volume, I feel like that this was so much fun that it kind of almost surpasses what I loved about the first volume a lot. And I feel like that this just gives so much amazing backstory, because this entire volume is pretty much nothing but backstories of characters that we've already been seeing in this series as of now. And I just was really surprised to find that I loved the backstory, like the fact that they really fleshed out the characters and that they, had really interesting things about them that I had not expected in terms of like how their stories intertwine. And it just really seemed to be kind of a small world as opposed to this being a huge universal kind of story, which this is. This is a sci-fi story that is all about the fact that there are these AI that basically supposedly go rogue and they go and kill a bunch of people. And so all of the life forms that there are in the universes, because this, spans different planets and other universes and galaxies, they all decide basically to then eradicate the entire AI population. And one of those AI, Tim 21, ends up actually being put to sleep, and he's asleep for 10 years before waking out of that and learning about all these things that have happened. And when that happens, then there's a lot of people that then kind of get the signal that he's awake, and so they all go toward him because some of them want to kill him, some of them want to use him for their own gain, that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on in this series that is very interesting. And then this one, like I said, plays a lot on the backstories of those characters that we meet throughout the series that really showcase how intertwined they are with each other without even realizing it. So I thought this was a really great sequel to the series, and honestly I think was leaps and bounds ahead in terms of the first volume, just purely because we get so much more context of the entire situation with this one. Question 3 is The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, a disappointing end to a series, because if y'all don't know, The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, while it was a really interesting story in its own right, was not nearly as good and quite a big disappointment for a lot of Mummy fans. I feel like the entire series as a whole was disappointing as opposed to just the last book, but the first thing that comes to mind is the Talisman duology by Stephen King and Peter Straub. Now, keeping in mind, The Talisman I did give a 3-star to. The Black House I gave 2 stars, the second book. And I do think that The Black House was way worse than the first one, but the whole series as a whole was just bad. It was just not good at all. And I feel like that it is probably the worst of the King books that I had ever gone through when I was going through that Stephen King reading series. So I would not recommend it for anybody, truthfully. And at that point, when I had finished the series, it was so bad to the point where I kind of started to question whether or not I wanted to really continue with King's work, because while I know that over time he did get better in terms of his writing and the way he wrote certain characters, I was so disinterested after reading the Talisman duology that it really left a bad taste in my mouth, to where I then from that decided to pretty much unhaul all of my Stephen King books. So if anything, I think that says a lot about how bad I felt about reading this series and how poorly it went for me personally. Next question is Rick O'Connell, a strong male character that is also a sweetheart. So think like your himbo kind of character. So this one, I'm not surprised is like the first person that comes to my head, because I've been reading a lot of this character recently, but that's Vax'ildan from the Legend of Vox Machina series. I read the story that was written by Marieke Nijenkamp, which was Kith and Kin, which essentially is the origin or part of the origin story of Vax'ildan and his sister Vax'alia in terms of like establishing their place in the world of Critical Role. And also this year, I read the first 2 full volumes of the Vox Machina Origins graphic novel series, and I have read issues 1 and 2 of the 3rd series, or basically what will become the 3rd volume of the origin stories. And so this character has just constantly been in my head, and I watch the D&D campaign of Vox Machina like all the time almost, and I just feel like this character is everything himbo that I just adore. He is a sweetheart to those that, you know, he really cares about. He's also really witty and funny, and the banter that he has with his sister is incredible. Just like the whole character that was created from Liam O'Brien, playing him through the D&D campaign, and then kind of how he has blossomed over the TV show, the graphic novels, the novels that have been done about him and his sister. Like, he's just that character, like, I fell in love with immediately, and still am falling over my feet for him, because like he's just everything I'm looking for in like a himbo guy. Super strong, super smart, you know, but also loves his sister, will protect anyone to death. And if you even look at the people he cares about the wrong way, he's gonna pull out one of his poison daggers and be ready to slit your throat. And I'm just like, I'm here for it. I'm here for Vax'ildan. He's my favorite character from Vox Machina for a reason. The next question is Evelyn Carnahan, which is a female character that is secretly a badass. Honestly, the first person that comes to my head is Moore from the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. Don't expect her to not want to slit your throat when you go after people she cares about. Like, Moore is that kind of silent, secret character that nobody expects a lot of times, I think, that would be in any way threatening, and yet she is one of the most badass characters I read about in A Court of Thorns and Roses. Granted, she doesn't get all of the attention like I think she should, but I do think that in her own right, she has proven over the series to be extremely powerful and extremely influential and important. Question 6 is Johnathan Carnahan, which is a character that is dumb but lovable. We love him. Maybe we hate them sometimes because of how stupid they are, but they're lovable. We all need a Johnathan in our lives at some point, I think. So again, I'm going back to Critical Role because he's the first person that pops into my head and the most clearly dumb character that you just can't help but love, but that's Grog from the Vox Machina graphic novels and comic books. He's so fucking stupid. Like, he has no actual brains. He's just full on, like, meathead. But you gotta love him because, again, when it comes to people he cares about, he will do anything to protect them, especially Pike. And it's just, there are moments where he has, like, really good ideas and it surprises you. But he's so dumb. And I just love him to bits because of the fact he's so dumb, and I'm just like, oh, honey, no, just don't try. The next question is Imhotep, which is your favorite villain, and oh, this one's hard because I've met a lot of really good villains over the course of my reading, especially this year, but I still think that my favorite one right now is the Darkling from the Shadow and Bone series. There is something about the fact that Leigh Bardugo wrote this character to be so lovable and so charismatic, and in Shadow and Bone it turns completely on its head, and still throughout the other two books in the series you still see him as that possibly charismatic, possibly just wanting to do the right thing kind of man. But at the same time, it's not that he wants to do anything right. He wants to just take over the world, and he's being, again, charismatic, and it's like, I totally understand why Alina was so back and forth with it, because he was incredibly manipulative, and I'm just like, oh, there is nothing I have found so far that matches up to the full manipulation that the fucking Darkling has reached for me. And the next question is the Scorpion King, a character that seemed cool but was disappointing. Now, the reason I have this question, for those of you that don't know, is that in the second movie, The Mummy Returns, it is about the story of the Scorpion King. And there's a spin-off movie called Scorpion King that also had, like, I think 3 other movies afterward that starred Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and then the character was then changed to different actors over time because there were, like, prequels and sequels and stuff that Dwayne was not a part of. But in The Mummy Returns, the CGI for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character of the Scorpion King, when he is fully enveloped as the Scorpion King, is not the best quality. It's like, you know, early 2000s CGI, so there was still a lot of things that were not done as nicely as they probably would be if it was made today and given the correct budget. But at the time, the character was not really as scary as I think a lot of people wanted, especially because we only saw the beginning of his story at the very beginning of the movie, and he was only in the movie for, I think, approximately 15 to 20 minutes at the end of it. So there wasn't really much of him going forward. So for this, again, like I said, you're picking something that was pretty disappointing in terms of a character. I think the closest thing I'm going to say is Tomie from the Tomie manga bind-up that there was by Junji Ito. And I only say disappointing because of the fact that I liked the idea of the character a lot. I really liked what Junji was going for with the entire story of Tomie, but we never really got an origin story as to how exactly she came about, if she was a lab experiment, if she was something supernatural. There were all these hints to possibly having been a lab accident of some kind, and it just never fully got developed. And so I think that in terms of like why it's disappointing for me is that I wanted to know more about her and I didn't get that, and I was kind of sorely disappointed by that, and that was why the story ended up getting like a 4 out of 5 stars for me as opposed to a 5 out of 5 stars. This question is Alex, and you're supposed to name 2 characters who would have an awesome kid together, because again, if you don't know, in the second movie, The Mummy Returns, Alex is the son of both Rick and Evelyn, because at the end of the first movie, The Mummy, they end up getting together and you learn that they got married and had Alex. So Alex is honestly a character who is the best representation of both his mother and his father, so that's why you're putting 2 characters that you think would make an awesome baby. Okay, so hear me out. What if we had Rhysand from the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas with Yennefer from The Witcher? Dark, brooding on both sides, dark hair, some kind of like really pretty eyes, half fae, half witch. I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty awesome baby. magically, like, badass from two very beautiful people. So that would be a very attractive and charismatic baby. Finally, the last question is Hamunaptra. Name a fictional world that is fascinating to you, which I'm going to say probably doesn't surprise many people because I've been talking about them a lot in this video, but the Night Court from the Court of Thorns and Roses series. Like, everything that I have learned going into this series is that people were obsessed with not just Rhysand, but the Night Court itself, and how beautiful it sounds and how ethereal it is. Like, it just seems like it would be such a fun place to explore, and especially if you were a fae, because the senses are heightened, and so, like, there's even more things you can see and more things you can experience as a fae in that world as opposed to a human. Experience everything with the solstices and the starfalls. Like, it sounds so beautiful. Like, how could you not want to be a part of that after hearing about how beautiful the Night Court is and, like, seeing these beautiful scenes all throughout the books, throughout that series, and just, so pretty. I just want to be a part of it. But that is all the questions for the Mummy Movies book tag. I hope you guys liked it. If you guys would like to do this again, like I said, go ahead and feel free to. I'm not going to tag anybody specific because I want all my friends to just be able to do this at their will. I would really appreciate it, though, if you guys would tag me in those if you guys do decide to do them, because I'd love to see your guys' answers. And if you want the questions, they will be listed down in the description for you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.